it reminded me of a conversation that you had written about in your book with a taxi driver in Mumbai. And I wanted to ask you, did you always plan this book that, you wrote down the incidences as it happened, or was this all of these were from your memory? Because I've noticed a lot of these incidences you've written down, just, real life incidences.
Well, Shreya, I want to tell you something. You should seriously contemplate journalism at some point in your career. You are an absolutely, and I'm not trying to flatter you, okay? Anita, I'm not trying to flatter your daughter, but that's a brilliant question. It gives me so much of satisfaction to know that you have really read the points in the book that probably triggered an emotion in you. Because I do believe ultimately we are emotional people, We are not plastic characters, We are emotional, we cry, we laugh, we have pain, we have reason to be joyous. These incidents really make you think. And the reason why I put them all in the book, Shreya, is because I do believe that, we all tend to always celebrate the people we think who are powerful. So we love to admire politicians, Bollywood actors, cricketers, celebrities. You saw how these celebrities showed you their chocolate eclair spine yesterday in the way they tweeted. The one knock on the head and everyone went tweeting saying, man, India's sovereignty is at risk. And I'll tell you what, Shreya, this country's real heroes are those unsung people that we encounter daily. I'll give you an example. Many people in my office will come late and, come up with some very brilliant excuse. But my driver of 24 years always comes home on time. Now, if I don't learn from that, I'm just being one elitist snob. I have learned the maximum from people that are so nondescript, never heard of. Ask a journalist today, they'll tell you they always, when they cover an election, they ask a taxi driver, ki, yahan ka hawa kya hai? But that man has traveled with many passengers and he's had conversations and he can tell you the mood of the general janta. So, Shreya, I have honestly tried to pepper the book with stories. You know that story where I talk about this young Muslim boy who gets into this flight with me and who's very worried about, his mother is very worried about his future in our country because of lynching. I actually had a conversation with him and I narrated that. And then in the same thing, I write about that stockbroker who said, hey, what's the big deal about lynching? Hua to hua, kya badi baat hai? Kisi ke maut ho gayi to kya badi baat hai? And of course, he's a stinking rich South Mumbai stockbroker. It doesn't make a difference to him. And I think it's important to see these contrasts. Because I believe a country will always struggle if the people who are educated and apparently enlightened put a certain curtain on top of their eyes. And I do hope that these stories make people realize that the idea of India is not the prerogative of Mr. Modi or Mr. Rahul Gandhi. It also belongs to Niranjan and Saroj and Shreya and Neeta and Sanjay and to that house help and to that laborer in Odisha, to that young girl who's studying to become a scientist in Durgapur, and maybe that young student who's struggling to get admission in a college in Darbhanga. Everyone owns the idea of India.
I today only actually read a quote. Somebody wrote that, you're patriotic when you speak up for the citizens. It doesn't necessarily have to be the politicians or anybody else. You're patriotic when
and the famous quote, Shreya, where they say that the true patriot is one who fights for his country against his government, because the governments of political parties will come and go. The BJP wins today, the Congress will win tomorrow, UPA will come in and NDA will come back. Listen, the country is much greater. And I'm glad, Neeta, you have done some extraordinary research on my previous interviews. And I have said it and I'll say it again. Mr. Modi and Mr. Rahul Gandhi are not the be-all and end-all of Indian politics. Okay? Life moves on. And life moves on. It will. Trump is already history. Okay? Let's recognize this reality. The people of this country deserve good governance. They need to breathe good air. They need jobs. They need to feel safe and secure. Women need to feel empowered. Women don't need to feel unsafe and discriminated against. We don't need these glass ceilings. People who are in love with people in their own sex can, love them without having some cop knocking on the door and threatening them with criminal intimidation. Let's become the country that Gandhi wanted us to become. And if this country begins to celebrate Nathuram Godse and actually denigrate Mahatma Gandhi, then I'm sure we have a massive crisis of morality.
I remember, in fact, I think I read it in the book or something, that in the beginning, I think Mr. Rahul Gandhi was really adverse to the tutor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think you kind of made him see that this is very important. And I think the number of followers that he has today,
Right.
we can see what is the power of tweeting. And I think he's very, very regular in that now.
Right. No, I think it's a good thing. I think, I mentioned that in my book, Neeta, for only one reason. This is the book here. For all those who haven't seen it, The Great Unravelling, India After 2014. I want to make a point that there were a lot of people who were very cynical about social media in the early stages. Shashi Tharoor was looked upon as this very Western, one of those Occidental imports into India, because Shashi also has this extraordinary vocabulary and this powerful, kind of expressions. And people thought that, this was something like more American, and it was like a Coke and Pepsi making it into the dusty terrain of India. I think everybody was wrong. And, one has to give credit to Prime Minister Modi for that. I'm a big critique of the BJP's politics, their ideology, and the way they basically have, in my opinion, put Indian democracy at great risk. But you got to give credit to Mr. Modi for citing this technological platform long before anybody else did. And 2014, well, Twitter and all was not that big yet, but we cannot deny that he used social media to build up his profile with a lot of people in our country. And he bulldozed his own party, the BJP, into saying that I'm a better candidate for Prime Minister than Sushma Swaraj and LK Advani. Because I don't think the BJP could ignore the social media, kind of hurricane or tsunami that was very pro-Modi. So ultimately, I'm glad Rahul Gandhi bit the bullet a little late in the day, but it's better late than never. And, right now, Rahul's tweets are pretty engaging, they're powerful, they raise tough questions. The question is that, it's never enough to just tweet. You need a combination of public outreach to really influence the larger national opinion.
You've always said that despite of everything, whatever has happened, I'll not like to go into that, you remain an ideological soldier of INC. And you really make it a point to always, whenever I read about you, this is something which really, really comes forward, because you are, as you say, a big fan of Gandhi Nehru viewpoints. India, we know, is the world's largest democracy, and we need really political commentators like you who are able to call spade a spade. And you've been very, very transparent in your views recently. And your political views are really making a lot of noise right now. So, but one question, which I don't know whether on this platform I should be asking you, but how do you counter the claims when people say that you are perhaps maybe crossing over to BJP?
Anita, I was kind of anticipating this question. I know that's the reason why I clarified on my Twitter at the very outset. There are transactional politicians in India. Ayaram, Gayaram was coined for that very reason. I know many of my colleagues from the Congress have moved on to the BJP, but I'm glad I'm different. And I think it takes all types to make the world, honestly. For me, this has been an ideological game from the very beginning. I am with the Congress because I am at core a liberal person. I have always been against abolition of Section 377. I believe India is a country that is inclusive by its very inherent character. I am secular to the core. I cannot imagine an India where I'm a Brahmin, I'm a Hindu, but I have never been brought up to look at a Sikh or a Jain or a Muslim or a Christian with any degree of suspicion, as preposterous, as absurd. I mean, the beauty of this country is its diversity. What makes India an enchanting story is our multicultural character, our hue of a blend of different castes and religions, and the foods we eat, the number of types in which we can make aloo and bengan. This is a fascinating country. How can we destroy that ethos? And therefore, let me answer you without getting into an intellectual mumbo jumbo. I am not going to join any political party. The Congress has suspended me because I think the Congress has behaved, in my opinion, frankly, stupid. You don't need to overreact to somebody who's a core member of your team. I've gone and defended Dr. Manmohan Singh when he was being piled on left, right, and center by the media. I've been, kind of a ideological believer in the principles of what the Congress stands for. It doesn't mean that the Congress didn't goof up. Huh? The Congress has made mistakes. All political parties make mistakes. It's part of the game. Nobody's, dyed in wool 24/7 perfect. Show me one person, one political party, one movie star who hasn't done a flop, one cricketer who hasn't scored a duck. We all have bad hair days. It's pretty normal. As you can make out by my hair, I have had quite a few bad hair days. But on a serious note, politicians and everyone makes mistakes. But I do believe you get a chance to, re-narrate your story or reinvent yourself. And therefore, I'm not going away anywhere. The Congress can suspend me because I've been outspoken. I've, called a spade, a shovel. But nobody can take away the ideology of the Congress from me. And that is a Gandhi and Nehru ideology. Go back to the history of the Congress. This is a party that fought for India's freedom struggle. And I believe today, when you find a Farooqi, or you find, people who are being jailed for posting a video which they put it on an error, a Rajdeep Sardesai and a Zafar Agha are called traitors. They have committed an act of sedition. Munawar Farooqi, for a comedian, he was arrested for having said nothing. I mean, just because they thought he's going to crack a joke that will offend some people, you put him in jail. I mean, where does it happen? You had this journalist who went all the way to cover the Hathras rape, violent incident, and he was arrested for what? I mean, so therefore you do realize that India has become an illiberal democracy, okay? And let's not even try and pretend about it. I mean, Tandav, people are upset. Tanishq TV commercial, people are very agitated. Love jihad laws are there in our country. Journalists are being targeted left, right, and center. The government tells Twitter to shut down a couple of handles. For God's sake, are we a democracy or what are we? Have we become an authoritarian country? Is this a tin-pot dictatorship? And therefore, I am willing to understand that no party is perfect. The Congress has its forms, but ideologically I'm a congressman. So Neeta, there's no question of me leaving the Congress. I'm perhaps more congressy than many of them put together.
To your book, I have to congratulate that, the way you speak and your personality comes out in exactly what you're writing, the commas and the brackets. So even though you've tried to put your book very factual, but in the brackets and in the commas, I know your opinions and I know where your views stand. And in fact, so I had this question. I think in the second chapter, Narendra Modi's chapter, you've acknowledged his brilliant Hindi skills, and in the same line you express that for a leader of the nation, it is a practical necessity that that person should know Hindi well enough. But yet you go on to say it's not something you endorse. So could you tell us a little bit more about why you feel so?
Because I do believe that, if you look at Indian politics from the beginning, most of the people here have been from the Hindi belt of India. And barring, of course, P.V. Narasimha Rao, who, by the way, spoke outstanding Hindi, incidentally. But Mr. Deve Gowda did not. But you have had mostly Hindi-speaking leaders. But I do believe that India is a country that needs to respect its different regional characteristics of our uniqueness. And you cannot make, and although I do believe that today when a leader speaks very, very good Hindi, India looks upon them as being powerful orators and speaking with the national sentiment. Mr. Modi, I don't think is a great orator. He's got a very predictable style, but he speaks brilliant Hindi. And I have met people, by the way, who say that we are so impressed by his Hindi that we think he sounds like a leader. Rahul, in my opinion, has not worked as hard on this aspect of his political rhetoric. It's important to get your Hindi right. And this is one feedback that a lot of us have given him, both formally and informally. I also, Shreya, I'm so glad you asked this question because I know that you have in a granular fashion really highlighted the portions that hit you hard. The reason why I mentioned that as a caveat is because I do believe that tomorrow, if there is somebody from Tamil Nadu or Kerala or Karnataka or Telangana who doesn't speak good Hindi, hey, that should not be held against you at all. After all, Hindi is not a national language, right? So, ultimately, India has to learn to listen to the language of, I would say, love, the language of tolerance, the language of development, the language of inclusivity. And whether you speak Hindi or English or Malayalam or Telugu or Tamil, to me that's irrelevant. And I think that is what we need to work towards. So I do mention the practical reality, as Shreya, as you rightly pointed out, that's true. It's pragmatic to speak good Hindi. यदि कोई हिंदी एक बहुत जज्बे के साथ या जुनून के साथ बोलता है और आपको लगता है कि यार ये बड़ा शानदार प्रवक्ता है, आप किसी को देखिए, आप टीवी पे जो भी भारतीय जनता पार्टी का हो या कांग्रेस पार्टी का हो, यदि उसका उच्चारण सही हो, सही शब्दों का प्रयोग किया जाए या बोलने के अंदाज में कुछ ऐसी काबिलियत हो, तो आपको लगेगा यार ये तो भविष्य में ये प्रधानमंत्री भी बन सकता है. So that is the general perception that we have. जो लोगों का नजरिया ऐसा होता है. So I wrote it from that aspect, but I do believe it doesn't matter whether you're a Bengali speaking or a Gujarati speaking or a Marathi speaking, and you don't know Hindi or English. I think that should not be a discriminating factor at all.